Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me. Glad you could be here. As usual, and as I pointed out in my pinned message in the chat, um, I will be, as usual, answering questions that were submitted ahead of time by my wonderful Patreon patrons and channel members. So if you are with us live and you are in the live chat right now, hi, people in the live chat, and you have something you want me to talk about or a question for me, or you were going to be generous and throw in a super chat or something like that, which of course is highly encouraged. Yes. Um, if possible, please hold on to all of that until I am through with the patron and member questions. And then I will spend the rest of the show hanging out with the live chat and I will talk about whatever you want. But I would hate, especially if you were going to be generous with the super chat, I would hate to miss the super chat or make you wait for a response because I didn't see it because I was paying attention to the pre-submitted questions. So now that we've got all that business out of the way, welcome as always. Thank you all for joining me, and let's get started with the patron and member questions. And the first one of those, hi, Kara. And hi, everybody. I'm glad you could make it, Kara. You said you couldn't make it to Poirot because you weren't feeling well. Well, I hope you're feeling better. So here we go. First question from my patrons and members is from Exploring Fate, who says, with the success of some of the newer Star Trek franchises, whether it be awards or fan based, this is a two-part question. First, what direction do you see all the newer Star Trek franchises going on the whole? And question two, the sequel, have the newer Star Trek franchises finally found their footing? Um, well, here's what I hope. I don't know if this is the direction that it's going for sure or not. I can only sort of make guesses based on what we've gotten so far and what little we know about what is yet to come. But it seems like the direction right now is to do new things with shows that are set in uh, previous eras in the timeline. In other words, instead of doing like what Star Trek The Next Generation did in 1987 and doing like a completely new series with all new characters set in the future relative to the last show, they're going to do shows that are set at various points in the timeline where other shows and movies we've already seen have been set, but they're not going to just do prequel stuff and they're not just going to be filling in backstory and stuff from other shows. They're going to be telling new stories like Strange New Worlds has mostly been. Um, and if that is, if I mean, if that is the direction it's going, and if that is something that they're going to keep doing for a while, I mean, I suppose it could be worse. And as long as the shows themselves are good, which again, Strange New Worlds has been the first season of it was outstanding. Like I personally don't really care what year the shows are set in. I don't really care what era of Star Trek the series takes place in, as long as it's good and as long as it's focused more on telling its own original stories than it is on, leading tours through the lore and just, doing pandering fan service. As long as it's not about that, I don't give a shit whether it's set during the TOS era or the movies era or the TNG era or before that or after that, that is immaterial to me. What matters to me is the stories. So if that's the direction they're going to go, I mean, I think, like I say, that things could be worse. And I make that guess based not only on that's the kind of show Strange New Worlds was in the first season, but also we still have um, the Emperor Giorgio led Section 31 series coming up at some point, and presumably that will be set in a previously seen era of the franchise, but it'll be focused on, that character and whatever she's doing in Section 31. And I'm not necessarily looking forward to the show on the basis of the premise, because I'm not really all that enamored with Section 31 as a concept. But if it's Michelle Yeoh leading a Star Trek series, that I am very interested in, as a starting point. So we'll see. We'll see. Um, And has it finally found its footing? I think so. I mean, at least for the most part, there are still some rough patches, as Star Trek Picard seemingly exists to remind us. But like, Discovery has gotten to the point where it's, there's a lot more good stuff than bad, and hopefully its fifth and now we know officially final season, when it comes out next year, will be good and will be a solid ending point for that show, which I think it deserves it. Um, like I've already said, Strange New Worlds is outstanding, and hopefully its second season will be a worthy follow up to the first. And Star Trek Prodigy, again, same thing. Star Trek Prodigy was just a wonderful surprise, just incredibly good in its first season. And again, hopefully the second season, whenever it is released, will be the same. So, I mean, there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff. And I do think it has found its footing. Honestly, I think it mostly found its footing by the time Discovery got to its second season. The second season of Discovery, I mean, none of the seasons of Discovery have been perfect, but none of them so far have been nearly as rough as that first season. I mean, the first season had its moments, but boy was it uneven, and boy was it rough in a lot of patches there. So I think, yeah, I think it's found its footing. I don't think there's anything to worry about. Again, highs and lows. Not everything's good, but for the most part, I think it's reasonably stable, creatively and commercially speaking, for now. Brian McKinley, who is excited to ask his first question as a patron. Well, thank you for becoming a patron, Brian. I'm looking forward to the question. Hi, Steve. Thank you for doing these askaways and also for your great videos. My question, if you could interview any historical person, who would it be and why? Bonus points if you include some of the questions you would ask. Note, for the sake of the question, assume you and your interviewee can understand each other perfectly. I like that note at the end, just to make sure, in case I was going to pick someone who lived thousands of years ago. But honestly, if I could interview one person and, like, ask them anything I wanted, I wouldn't have to go back that far into human history. I would want to talk to, one of the astronauts from the 60s. I would love to talk to, Neil Armstrong, like post moon landing, and just ask him about that. I would love to ask him how it felt to become the first human being to walk on the moon, and then, like, 30 years later, become the host of an aviation history show on A&E. Like, what's that career track like? Like, was there ever a moment when he was on the set doing some host segment for that show? I think it was called First Flights? I don't know, but for those of you who don't know, Neil Armstrong, the first human being to walk on the moon, in the 90s, hosted an aviation history show on A&E. And I wonder if there was ever like a moment where he thought, he was getting ready. He was on the set. He was getting ready to go stand in front of, like, some F-18 or something in a hangar as the backdrop, as he's going to do this little host introduction for this episode of this basic cable history series. And he thought, I was on the moon. Like, I stood on the surface of the moon before anybody else in human history had ever done that. And now here I am, talking about old planes on A&E. Like, that's my job now. I don't know. I would love to ask him that. So, but I'm pretty sure he would understand, and hopefully have a nice chuckle over it. Joe goes over. Having my own tiny YouTube channel has made it easier for me to tell which creators use a teleprompter, which read from notes, which read and often record from a laptop, and which just seem to wing it. I'll often spend dozens of hours working on a single script, practicing over and over before donning a lav mic and standing in front of a green screen. Despite having a teleprompter, I'll still constantly flub lines, so I don't bother trying to do everything in a single take or even to hide the cuts in my finished video. You, on the other hand, speak flawlessly into the camera and do not seem to be using a teleprompter. I never notice any cuts between takes, and every video feels like one long, uninterrupted speech. Do you begin with a script, or do you just refer to notes while recording? If scripted, do you memorize them, or do you read from a teleprompter and are just that good at hiding it? Or do you have a rough idea what you want to say and simply wing it in front of the camera? Okay, so Most of my videos are scripted, and I do use a teleprompter. Now, I didn't always. I didn't use a teleprompter regularly until about 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. It's been relatively recent in the history of my channel. So I use a teleprompter for everything now. Before that, I would work from the script, and I would memorize chunks of it at a time, and I would do those directly to camera from memory. And then once I got a good take, I would move on to the next chunk of script until I got the whole thing out, and then I would just disguise the cuts. And I still do that with the teleprompter videos. There are a few of my sort of monologue videos that I usually put up on Mondays. Where it's just me standing in my living room, or me in front of a simple black backdrop, or me in front of a green screen. And then I'll key in, like, like with the Chat GPT video I did, I put in a background of like an old 1980s computer lab, or with the video I did about works that have entered the public domain this year that I put it back at the beginning of January. I green screened in a scene from the Library of Congress. So, for those, some of those I can get straight through in one take, like without having to pause, without having to go back and do something again. And if I can get it straight through in one take, and it looks good, like it flows well, and I don't feel like I have to edit it to make it play better, then often with those, I'll just put up that take. Like I won't use any graphics, and I won't do any, cuts into closer shots or anything. I'll just put it up like that, because I think it's more impressive that way. If I am able to get through the whole thing and make it sound good and make it sound compelling in one take, I feel like that's a pretty neat trick. And I usually just put the video out like that. But if I do have to do multiple takes, if I do flub a line and I have to go back and fix it, or if I have to, maybe if I outrun the teleprompter and I have to stand there and wait for a second for it to catch back up, or something like that, and I feel like I have to edit it so that the video plays better, even though I didn't necessarily mess anything up, then I do disguise the cuts. I either cut from a wider shot to a closer shot, or I cut to a graphic or a bit of video or something to disguise the cut. So I do that. And if you can't tell, if that doesn't read to you like I'm fixing a mistake or covering something up when you watch the video, then I guess I did my job. But for the most part, no, I work from a script that I am reading on a teleprompter. I do think I'm pretty good with a teleprompter, in all modesty. I think I'm able to perform with a teleprompter very naturally. So it sounds like I'm making it up as I go along, even though I'm reading from a prepared script. And when I need to put in cuts to fix something, or for whatever reason, I do my best to disguise them so that the video plays and flows naturally. And every once in a while, like I did today with the video I put up today about called Never Let the Devil Out, every once in a while I will do just an improv video. The video I put up today, where it's just me talking into the camera that I have on my monopod. So it's kind of a not quite a handheld camera, but it's more mobile. It's not locked down like on a tripod. That was off the cuff. I knew what I wanted to talk about. I knew basically what I wanted to say. I had it in my head as, okay, I'm going to talk about the Twilight Zone episode, and then I'm going to use that to transition to the tweet, and then I'm going to talk about this and this. And I just made it up as I went along, but I had an idea of the structure in my head. So that wasn't scripted, and that wasn't using a teleprompter. That was just off the cuff from an idea that I had thought out beforehand. So I do those every once in a while. If I have an idea for one, and I think it's worth just setting up the camera and the light and just doing it that way instead of scripting something. But for the most part, scripted, teleprompter, edited to try and hide the cuts. And I'm glad it works for you. I'm glad that it doesn't come across as, I'm glad that it was good enough to fool you into thinking that I was actually better than I am. So I appreciate it. David Colby. In this episode of TNG, where Picard does a Die Hard, the terrorists are on board to steal an explosive, unstable resource from the Enterprise's engine. Yes, that's right. They're stealing trilithium resin. an element that does not exist, was made up on the spot, sounds stupid, and has infuriated me for 20 years since I first saw the episode. Steve, the ship runs on antimatter. They fucking use antimatter. The ships run on goddamn antimatter. Antimatter has an efficiency rate of literally 100 goddamn percent. You do not make a bigger explosion. It can't happen. Just have them steal antimatter. There's no part of the plot that does not make perfect sense without them stealing antimatter. Get a fucking science advisor, you goddamn 1980s hacks. Now that I've got that off my chest, what's your irrelevant thing about a 30-plus-year-old Star Trek show that just bothers you to this day? Is it how they killed Kern? It should be. That was fucked. The Kern thing doesn't really bother me. And neither does the antimatter thing, although I totally get your point. Like, you're 100% right, and it would have been much easier for them to just be stealing the antimatter as opposed to trilithium resin. I'm complete. Again, it doesn't bother me, but I completely agree with everything you've said, other than the 20-year-old bitterness and rage that still burns inside you. What's something that bothers me? Nothing really bothers me all that much. There are little things that I just notice that don't really bother me, and in some cases that I kind of chuckle at them. You know, I notice that it's something wrong, but it doesn't affect my enjoyment of the episode. Like in the episode Genesis, where everybody de-evolves on the ship, and Barclay de-evolves into a spider, even though Barclay's human. So that shouldn't be possible. Like, humans did not evolve from spiders. I'm pretty sure whatever our common ancestor that we share with spiders, it's back far enough that it's before we split off from that branch before spiders themselves had actually evolved. So there are no spiders in our evolutionary history as human beings. And of course, there are ways to smooth it over. There are ways to headcanon it and say, well, maybe Barclay isn't 100% human. Maybe he has some alien back further in his lineage that was evolved from insects or arachnids or something. Like, yeah, there's ways to get around it. But I mean, and the real answer is, who cares? It's Star Trek. Like, who gives a shit? It's Star Trek. They did a thing and it's fine, whatever. But as someone who, has at least a functional awareness and sort of layman's knowledge of how evolution works, no, if human beings were somehow de-evolving, which is a problematic concept scientifically in and of itself, but let's just go with that. If somehow humans were able to de-evolve and take on the traits of organisms further back in the evolutionary timeline, we would not become spiders. We would not we would not manifest the traits of spiders. We don't have those. Those aren't encoded in our DNA. That our common ancestor with spiders is way back there, way before spiders existed. But yeah, that's one. Again, doesn't really bother me, but I notice it. I notice it, and I'm like, that's not how that is. But like I say, it's Star Trek. Thomas James Wright / Black Body Economics. Thank you for giving a shout out to our little Frenchie buddy, the late Professor Green. My partner, my daughter, and I were all listening, and it warmed our hearts. Well, I'm glad about that. 1 week after Professor passed, his sister, Lavender, was rushed to the ER and diagnosed with heart disease. What a shitty few weeks. You might remember that I mentioned we were working on a Trek-like space adventure with our pups and Professor as the captain. We've decided to go through with it and help and use it to help raise funds for Lavender's heart surgery. It's going to be silly, campy, and littered with really bad puns and nerdy jokes. We also want to include more serious topics without making it clash with itself or seem too weird. Would you have any thoughts or suggestions on this? Know any other shows or projects that pulled something like this off and did it well? The ship is the CSS Echo CA09. CSS equals Contact and Survey Scout. Echo refers to Lavi's echocardiogram. CA09 equals K9 Assignment 9, also CA9. Get it? Yes, I get it. K9 is very clever. If I can toot my own horn a little bit, I do think that my Stuffy series pulled that off a time or two. I think the old Stephen Stuffy videos had a couple of storylines and a couple of episodes where they balanced humor with more serious topics. Um, and I think, even though I need to qualify this and say Joss Whedon is an asshole in his personal life, and I fully am in support of all the people who have spoken out against him mistreating them on the sets of his various shows and films. But Joss Whedon's shows Buffy and Angel did a good job with that as well, of balancing humor and more dramatic, serious things. So yeah, I mean, and for me personally, the way I approached it when I was doing like a Stuffy episode where I wanted to have something serious happen, or I wanted the audience to be invested in the character so that when something serious did happen, like they would be interested in it and they would feel what I hoped they would feel, but also make the show funny, which was always very important to me. Uh, always be ready to transition back and forth in a way that feels smooth, so that you know uh, you can go into the serious bit and then you can come out of the serious bit with a joke. And again, I mean, sometimes it's tough, and you don't want it to feel like you don't want it to feel unnatural, and you don't want it to feel like there's a bump when you shift gears. You know what I mean? You need to be able to move smoothly from the seriousness to the joke and then back, into serious mode if you want. The Coen brothers are pretty good at this in their films, especially in some of their more absurdist movies. Like for instance, Jason and I just reviewed The Big Lebowski on late seating, and The Big Lebowski is like 99% it's just comedy. Like it's a really funny, like really funny movie. But then there is a kind of a serious bit at the end, not super serious. It doesn't get like super heavy or anything, but one of the characters dies. And there's this beautiful scene where they are scattering his ashes that goes from just the heights of absurdity, where you're just laughing your ass off. And then there's this kind of tender moment, like that follows right after the absurdity, where John Goodman's character Walter has gotten yelled at for his antics by the dude Jeff Bridges, and he gets kind of serious and kind of uh regretful and apologetic, and he just keeps saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And it's not played for a laugh, you know so there are examples you can look at. I would also suggest maybe the watch some Charlie Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was good at that, from going uh, from like comedic to serious, and sometimes like sentimental and maudlin. I mean, sometimes he would go a little too far, in the other direction. But the switch back and forth, he handled really well. So yeah, it can be done. It can be done. But you have to be smooth about it, and you have to be ready. If your primary aim is for it to be funny, but you just wanted to touch on some serious subjects or have some dramatic moments amidst the comedy, then you need to know where you're going comedy wise in order to get out of that dramatic part. Lynn Leno's in the world of Star Trek. Don't you think that there would be male contraceptives in use, and that people like captains would be using them to stop causing unintended pregnancies? P.S. I think you could do a whole video on this subject. I'd love to see it. No one talks about family planning in Kirk and Picard's time, but isn't that part of the utopia we imagine? No surprise pregnancies? Thanks. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the big strike against people like Captain Kirk and Captain Picard, as far as unplanned pregnancies still being a thing, and finding out years later that they have kids they didn't know about, is that they are characters in a show. And drama always supersedes realism, or not always, but often it does, and which I have absolutely no problem with, by the way. Yes, it isn't super realistic to have a show set in a sort of utopian future like Star Trek, where medical care is not only incredibly advanced, but freely available, seemingly to everyone. It's really not realistic that there would be any such thing as a surprise pregnancy. Like, it just, you would think that in the Federation that just would never happen, because birth control for everybody, regardless of your gender, it would be something that you could just do without a problem. It would be a shot that you give yourself in the morning. It would be an IUD that you could probably uh, implant and remove yourself as you wanted. You know what I mean? It would be so easy. It would be so not a big thing. It would be completely normalized. Everybody who wanted to do it would do it, and there would just be no issue with unplanned pregnancy, period. But then you couldn't have surprise kids as story beats. So there you go. But no, I think you're right. Realistically, it would not be a thing in the world that has been established. Agent Meister, who walks in shadows, moves in silence, and guards against extraterrestrial violence. I like that. It's a little poem you wrote there. Peldor Joy, mon capitan. The subject of the DC villain Bane came up in the last Ask Away. He's always been a favorite character. He's always been my favorite character in Batman's Rogues Gallery. I know you said that he should only have been used once and then never used again. I get where you're coming from, but I always enjoyed seeing him pop up in the various Bat sagas of the late 90s and early 2000s. I thoroughly enjoyed Tom Hardy's portrayal of the character in The Dark Knight Rises. To think that the actor who played that skinny string of misery Shinzon of Remus went on to act as this behemoth. In recent years, I've heard criticisms of the character in Dark Knight Rises, the mask, the voice, the backstory, but fuck me, I love everything about this version of Bane. The guy is a force of nature. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Tom Hardy's Bane and Dark Knight Rises in general, as it's usually seen as the least loved from the Nolan trilogy. Also, whose bright idea was the toilet brush? I mean, geez, man, those things really hurt. It wasn't me. That's all I can say. It wasn't me. I think Tom Hardy's Bane is fantastic. I think that's a terrific version of the character, and I think he's the best part of that movie. I really have no complaints about Bane in The Dark Knight Rises. I think the mask is great. I think the voice is great. I think Tom Hardy plays him great. I think he's the best part of the movie. He's terrific. And I think the movie as a whole is underrated. I don't think it's even in the same class as The Dark Knight, but I think it's better than Batman Begins. To me personally, Batman Begins is one of the most overrated superhero movies of the last 30 years. I think Batman Begins, to me, is easily number 3 in terms of quality in that Nolan trilogy. I think The Dark Knight is the best. Dark Knight Rises is second place after some distance, but still second place. And then Batman Begins is below that. I mean, the thing about Dark Knight Rises is it's too long. It has a little too much going on. And the resolution between Batman and Bane is unsatisfying because we don't really have a reason why Batman wins when he comes back. If you look at the story structure that they're doing here, the story structure in terms of the Batman and Bane story in Dark Knight Rises, it's kind of like a Rocky movie. It's a little bit like Rocky 3, where Batman and Bane have their first fight, just like Rocky and Clubber Lang have their first fight in Rocky 3, and Rocky loses. Okay? Clubber Lang beats him. Then Rocky goes on his sort of personal quest to reinvent himself, to rediscover himself, to train harder and train in a different way and come back as strong as he was before, but in a different way, so that he has, you know, tools that he didn't have, and he's a smarter fighter than he was before. And then he has a strategy, and I talk about this a lot on Late Seating, and I've talked about it in videos on the channel here every once in a while. One of the great, most reliable formulas for writing, I usually talk about it in context of writing like action adventure stories, but it works in other contexts as well. the characters make a plan. We as the audience find out what the plan is. The plan doesn't work. And then the hero has to come up with something else, on the fly in order to win. And that happens in Rocky 3, where Rocky and Apollo have a plan for how they're going to beat Clubber. It's not going super well. I mean, it goes well for a while, but then it's not working. Like Clubber is still hanging on, and Rocky realizes on the fly, like in the match, he realizes I have to do something else. And what I have to do is I have to absorb all of his punishment. So he tires himself out, and I have to make him mad. I have to do the counterintuitive thing. This ferocious, angry fighter who feeds on his emotions, Clubber Lang, right? I have to intentionally provoke him and make him as angry as he's ever been and have him take out all of his violence and all of his anger and rage and all of his force on me. And I have to take it. And then when he has exhausted himself, then I move in for the kill and I have to knock him out. And that works. That's how Rocky beats him. So in Dark Knight Rises, same basic pattern. Batman loses the first fight with Bane. He gets sent off to the pit, where Bane came from. He rehabilitates himself physically and mentally and spiritually. He makes the sort of leap of faith that he has to make to get out of the pit and get back to Gotham. And then he has his rematch with Bane, and he just wins this time. And there's not really a reason in the fight as to why he wins. This time he just beats him, And that's unsatisfying to me. And I think it was unsatisfying to a lot of people, even if they couldn't quite put their finger on it. So that to me is the big weakness in The Dark Knight Rises. People point out other things. They say like, oh, how did he get back into Gotham when it was closed off? And those are minor plot holes I don't really care about. To me, the emotional lack in the story is that it builds up to the rematch between Batman and Bane, the second confrontation after Batman lost the first time, and the second time he just wins. He just wins. It's not really clear what was different in terms of the fight. He just wins. Not very satisfying. So yeah, and I'll tell you something else about Dark Knight Rises. Best final shot of any Batman movie. I love the final shot of Dark Knight Rises. Yeah. Final shot of the Batman is really great too. When he's on the bike and he's like looking ahead to Gotham as he's like, speeding back toward the city after he said goodbye to Catwoman. That's a fantastic final shot as well. But the final shot of Dark Knight Rises, oh, perfection. So anyway, yeah. Underrated movie. Not a great movie. Certainly not the best of that trilogy, but underrated. Michael Hanneline considering changing to Michael Ridire or Ridire. I don't know how you would pronounce it. Ridire. Hey, Steve, according to my calendar, today is National Peanut Butter Lovers Day. It reminded me that in your last Q&A stream, you said that something you were addicted to more than Star Trek was peanut butter sandwiches. So now for some hard-hitting questions. Oh boy, peanut butter questions. Crunchy or creamy? I'll take these one at a time, okay? Crunchy or creamy? I love both, but for the last several years, I have been a creamy peanut butter guy. All natural or hydrogenated? Again, I've had both. The last couple years, I have been getting natural. Plain white bread toasted? No, not. Sometimes I'll have peanut butter toast. In fact, I was planning on having some peanut butter toast later tonight after the show as a snack. Not white bread though. I have multi-grain bread. That's just the kind of bread that I buy. I haven't bought white bread for years. But so no, multi-grain bread, not white bread. But if I'm making a peanut butter sandwich, not toasted, but sometimes I will have peanut butter toast, as a thing. Just peanut butter, or do you add honey, jam, marshmallow, etc.? Honey. I almost always put honey on my peanut butter. Yeah. Whether it's peanut butter toast like I'm having later, or whether it's like a peanut butter sandwich, always a generous portion of honey. When are we getting a peanut butter sandwich review video? I don't plan on making a peanut butter sandwich review video, but the fact that I eat peanut butter sandwiches is going to come up in an upcoming Stuffy short It will not probably actually let me I have them all plotted out in my playlist here. Let me check real quick and see what the one that I am premiering tonight is not is not peanut butter sandwich related, but yes, the next one. So not tonight, but in 2 weeks on the next Ask Away, the Stuffy and Friends YouTube short that I will be premiering will be peanut butter sandwich related. So you can look forward to that. Have you ever gotten weird with your peanut butter sandwiches? I once made a sandwich with all natural peanut butter, blackberry preserves, and white cheddar on a fresh baguette, and it was actually pretty damn good. No, I'm not very adventurous with the making of my peanut butter sandwiches, but you know what? I can kind of, the white cheddar is the thing that feels out of left field there, but I can kind of see it. Like, I can kind of see it. I hope I'm not putting you off balance with these hard-hitting questions. No, not at all. I love talking about peanut butter and peanut butter sandwiches and the fact that, you know, if it were nutritionally possible, I would probably live on them exclusively. I love a good peanut butter sandwich. Danny K. Hey, Steve, think of an actor off the top of your head. Any actor, living or dead. What Star Trek race do you think they'd be best suited for? Willem Dafoe. And I think he would definitely be a Reman. Wouldn't Willem Dafoe as a Reman? Can't you just see it? Although you might not want to, there's two reasons why you might not want Willem Dafoe to play a Reman. The first reason is you wouldn't want to bury him under all that makeup because he has such an amazing face just naturally. And the second reason is he already played one of those in Shadow of the Vampire. But maybe Willem Dafoe as like an old school classic Trek Klingon without the bumpy forehead. That could be something there too. But Willem Dafoe is who I'm saying. Jim Baker, the Jedi are almost too powerful. Limits had to be placed on their force abilities or they would become world-breaking. I understand that, but there are no limits in the imagination. Suppose you were an average Jedi with average abilities with the force, but you could choose to focus all of your training on a single ability in order to achieve mastery in it. Which force ability would you train? And it's okay to think beyond the limits of the movies. For instance, it never happened in the movies, but if someone had true mastery of telekinesis ability, they could literally lift themselves up and be carried along by the force, like a true Skywalker. They would be able to fly. These are the things I ponder when I've smoked a healthy amount of legal cannabis. I'm not a big enough Star Wars nerd to have too many options about this. But the trick that Luke pulls in The Last Jedi is pretty cool, where he force projects himself like from apparently many, many light years away. And he can like actually physically be present and, have a lightsaber duel with somebody, even though it's just a force projection. Like that's pretty cool. If I could learn how to do that without also killing myself from the exhaustion necessary to do it, that would be pretty cool. I think I'd shop for groceries that way. I would just send my force projection out, to the grocery store and have it come back and bring the groceries. And then I would, if there were dishes that needed done, I would have it do the dishes. I'd basically just have like a force projected butler of myself. I would like to get good enough as a Jedi to be able to do that. Hugh, bet your ass. We have a new winner for best username, or for best name under which a question has been submitted anyway. Quick question, is Annika Hansen 7 of 9's dead name? I'm only asking because I know she prefers using the name she was given by the Borg, as she spent more time of her life as a Borg than a human, and she therefore identifies with it more. But I didn't get the impression she didn't still think Annika was one of her names, even if it wasn't one she liked to use. She may have come straight out and said it isn't her name and I just missed it. I'm wondering if Shaw is just a prick or if he's deliberately depersonizing her in the same way people do to trans NB folk. I know when I watched that episode, it struck me as a dead naming situation, and I assumed that was the intended response that they were going for. And I've also seen several trans folks online who interpreted it that way as well, that it was the equivalent of Captain Shaw dead naming her. So yeah, I think that's probably the intended point. Now, whether or not they're actually going to go anywhere meaningful with that, I have no idea, knowing that it's the Picard show, I wouldn't bet on it because they have a history of introducing storylines that you think, oh, they must have something planned for that, and then it just goes absolutely nowhere, and they forget about it, and then it's like it never happened. So I don't know if they're going to do anything with it other than use it to establish that Captain Shaw is a dick. I suspect that was what it was. Because in that first episode, one of the things that Jason and I both complained about with the first episode in our review was they made Captain Shaw, they made sure we got the point that Captain Shaw was a dick in the laziest, most obvious ways they possibly could. So they had him insult Captain Picard's wine. They had him talk shit about jazz in front of Riker, and they had him dead name Seven of Nine. So it's like, oh, okay, what are the easiest, laziest, most obvious ways we can establish to the audience this guy's kind of a dick? Boom, boom, boom. So I wouldn't, just again, knowing what show it is, I wouldn't expect it to go anywhere. And I haven't seen episode 3 yet. I'm not watching episode 3 until tomorrow, so I don't know if it was a part of episode 3. Although, I would bet that it wasn't, but we'll see. But yes, I definitely think you are not the only person who took that as a dead naming kind of thing, and I think that was probably the intention. A very tired, overworked, and still underpaid some random geek. So a friend of mine has said this: you have to separate the artist from the art, or else you will be a miserable person who can't enjoy any art. And I just want to know your best counter argument to that statement. My friend even says we don't drop authors like Orson Scott Card just because of the problematic stuff they've said, to which I say, no, we do. Some of my friends have stopped reading Ender's Game because of the author's homophobia. My friend also says, look, J.R.R. Tolkien and Lovecraft have said worse things. Are they not canceled? Unlike J.K. Rowling? First of all, Tolkien and Lovecraft are both dead. They can't hurt anyone anymore. And Lovecraft's work is public domain. Those stories can be retold without the clear racism. So yeah, according to my friend, I don't get it when I say there are other action RPGs with wizards and magic in it. Erg. Anyway, your thoughts on separating the artist from the art. And give money to Phoenix and Joanna, please. The problem I have with it is when people say you have to separate the art from the artist. As you point out in your question, no, you don't. That is completely up to you. If you find out that the author of your favorite book series is a racist or was a racist, even if they wrote it 100 years ago, it doesn't matter. If you decide after learning that you don't want to read those books anymore, if that has tainted those works for you and you can no longer enjoy them, and you decide, I'm not going to read this anymore, I'm not going to recommend this to people anymore, I do not want to or am not able to separate the art from the artist, that is completely fine. That is your right. That is your choice. That is your preference. That is your reaction. If you can't or won't separate the art from the artist, more power to you. That is completely valid. And I think in the case of most people, it's not a general rule. It's case by case. I know with me personally, there are certain works, whether they're books or comics or movies or TV shows or whatever, there are lots of things that I love that were made by problematic people or made with the contributions of problematic people. In some cases, problematic does not even come close to doing it justice. Some of them are truly horrible people who have done awful, awful things that in some cases they should probably go to prison for. There's not a hard, fast rule for me where I say, okay, I will, if someone involved in making this thing turned out to be a shitty person, I will automatically not watch it anymore or not read it anymore or whatever. It's case by case. It depends on what the artist did or said or whatever the problem is. It depends on the work itself and any number of factors related to that, what it means to me personally, whether to what degree the problematic aspects of the artist are present in the work. whether or not the artist is still alive and still able to profit from it, as you point out with your, talking about Lovecraft. Um, those all factor in. And a lot of it also is just kind of an intuitive, emotional response. I don't react the same way to every single thing. You know, I'm not a robot. My emotional reactions are not governed by mathematical principles. There could be two situations with problematic artists that another person might see as equivalent, and they would say, okay, well, if you can't separate the art from the artist in this case, then how come you can separate the art from the artist in this case? I don't know. It's maybe, maybe I should, maybe I shouldn't. I'm not sure. So it's a very personal thing, and it's based on your preferences and your taste and your experience and your choices and your feelings. So by no means do you ever have to separate the art from the artist. You don't. You probably do in certain cases, just like I do, but you don't have to. And anyone who demands that you do is probably trying to carry water for somebody, like with your friend and the J.K. Rowling thing. They're probably trying to say, like, look, just get over it. What J.K. Rowling has said, it's not that big of a deal. Just get over it. That's really the message, and they're trying to cover it by saying, come on, if you don't separate the art from the artist, then you'll never be able to enjoy anything. I don't really think they care about that. I think they care about making space for themselves primarily, but for other people as well, who just want to continue to enjoy and patronize the work of J.K. Rowling, and they don't want to have to hear about it from other people who have a problem with J.K. Rowling's fucking awful, shitty opinions on trans people. I think that's really what's at work there, if I had to guess. But yeah, separating the art from the artist is a personal choice and a personal reaction, and you do not have to do it, and you do not have to not do it. It's up to you. Isaiah Taylor. So, Steve, what do you consider as good cinematography and dialogue, especially for B movies? As you know, we kind of differ in our appreciation of cinema styles. You're more of a meat and potatoes, while I admire large, sweeping vistas, a la Titanic or Apollo 13. Of course, I'm doing this as a continuation of me talking about my Centipedes movie. Any pointers? Thanks. Good cinematography in B movies. Good cinematography and dialogue. Spaghetti westerns. Really good spaghetti westerns. Like Sergio Leone, Clint Eastwood spaghetti westerns. Like Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More. I think by the time we get to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I think we're out of B movie territory by that point, because Good, the Bad, and the Ugly I don't think it's quite accurate to call that a B movie. But Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, I think would qualify as B movies. And they're exquisitely shot and very simple. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly has some really impressive, really artful shots, but Fistful of Dollars and For a Few Dollars More, for the most part, are pretty nitty gritty, straightforward, boom, boom, boom in terms of style. And they're beautiful. Like they're so well shot. They're so well made. And honestly, in terms of dialogue, I mean, there are some B movies with some great dialogue too. I've always thought the dialogue in George Romero's Dawn of the Dead was fantastic. I mean, I think that's just an incredibly well-written movie, especially in terms of the dialogue. I think it's very naturalistic dialogue that is delivered for the most part very well from a cast of not super experienced, well-known actors. So I would throw out that as an example of dialogue, and I would say the Sergio Leone spaghetti westerns in terms of look and cinematography. Stephen G. Clenard. Hey, Steve. So I'm 2 episodes into Picard season 3. Oh, me too. And there's already quite a lot going on. Picard and Beverly and Jack, Vadic, what's the deal with Shaw, Worf and Raffi? More than enough to fill a 10-episode season. Do you know what else I think the show needs? Not more stuff. Just tell this story. Do not keep cramming in more. And yet we know there is more to come. Lore, Moriarty, Geordi, Troy, Ensign Gates, Nurse Ogawa, Robo Livingston. That's true. We do have to get Robo Livingston in there. It feels like the producers are compensating for a lack of confidence by overstuffing it. Anyhow, I'm off to watch episode 3, but I swear that if they cram in some heretofore unteased recycled crap, I will have a flat-out conniption fit. Well, the thing is, like I said, I haven't watched episode 3 yet, but episode 3 is out, so we have 7 episodes to go. And the story threads that they have introduced so far, I mean, they do have to go somewhere. Like we need to fill 10 episodes of stuff. Now, I suppose you could fill 10 episodes of stuff by just continuing to throw more stuff out there. That's one way to do it. Not necessarily the best way to do it, but I would rather them do that than not introduce anything else from now on and just dribble out what little story they have left for the next 7 episodes. Like they're, that to me is the greater of the two evils. So if there's a lot more stuff to come, and we know that there are other things to come. There are characters that we know are going to show up at some point that we haven't seen yet. So yeah, Geordi's not there yet, so that's coming. Haven't seen Brent Spiner yet, so that's coming. Haven't seen that fucking Moriarty hologram, which for some fucking reason is going to be in this show. Haven't seen that yet. Don't know what fucking horseshit that is. So that's on the way, So we know that there are things that haven't happened yet that are yet to happen. I would rather it wind up that it had too much story. I would rather it end up with too much stuff than a too small amount of stuff to fill the number of episodes they have. That's my 2 cents. I would just like for the rest of the episodes to be as okay as episode 2 was. Like after episode 1 was fucking terrible. Episode 2 was surprisingly okay, after that rotten first episode. If the rest of them could just be surprisingly okay, I would take that. Like I would take that. Just stay a little bit above fucking awful for the next 7 or 8 episodes. And I think we can call it good, right? But I don't know if that is within the abilities of the people who make this show. For some reason, because they've shown themselves to be incredibly capable of making good television and other shows. I don't know what's going on. I just know that when people come to work on Star Trek Picard, they don't do a good job. Black Cover 95. A common rebuttal to the complaint that Star Trek has become too political is the fact that it has been unsubtle in its political messaging since the beginning. What I haven't seen addressed much is this. Star Trek TOS's more ham-fisted episodes weren't that good. The episode I keep thinking of is Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. It's held up as an example of Trek at its most obvious, yet its portrayal of race relations is kind of backwards, with their both sides approach to an issue where, even in the allegory, one race is clearly opposing the other. Much as I appreciate moral lessons, there's a point where execution can ruin the story ostensibly being told. I'm not sure how to complete this thought, but you see where I'm going with it, right? Yes, and I agree with you about Let That Be Their Last Battlefield. In fact, I mentioned that in one of the videos I made where I touched on that episode. I think I kind of made the exact point that I think you're making here, which is that it is an example of the fact that Star Trek, going back to the very beginning, has never been all that subtle about its political messaging. That's part of Star Trek. It's never been all that subtle, and it has frequently been very didactic. But also that, in the case of Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, the message is kind of muddled because, Lokai is clearly the good guy. Lokai is clearly the guy who is in the right, who is being chased, who is being oppressed by Beale, and yet the ending is like this sad, oh no, their mutual hatred destroyed each other. Isn't that sad? And it's like, yeah, should that really be the message? Like, it wasn't their mutual hatred that destroyed each other. Beale hated Lokai and wanted to destroy him. Lokai did hate Beale. Yeah, for sure. There was mutual hatred, but Lokai's was totally justified. Like, he hated Beale because Beale was trying to persecute and kill him and all of his people. So Lokai wasn't in the wrong. Beale was. And yet at the end, it was, oh, what a shame. They've destroyed each other. Isn't that terrible? Like, really makes you think. Is that the message you want to send? Are you sure? Are you sure about that? So yeah, but I know I agree with you completely. And yes, I appreciate a nice, blatant, unsubtle allegory in the cause of a progressive, political message. I think that's great. I don't have a problem with that at all. But you do need to make sure that you are sending the right message in the right way. And yeah, let that be your last battlefield as an example where that isn't the case. I will also add, though, I don't think that's the main reason that's a bad episode. I think the pacing of that episode is the main reason why it's not like a top tier episode. I think the political messaging being confused at the end is a problem, but it's not what sinks the episode. The episode just kind of drags for a lot of it. That to me is what makes that not such a good episode, more so than the political stuff. General Contact Unit Problem Child. My last few questions were super serious, so here's my attempt at something fun. So, Tasha's half-Romulan daughter, Sela, has taken over the whale probe and is using it to evaporate Earth's water. No Starfleet ships can get in to stop her because she's put a stolen Tholian web around the planet. Just when it seems like all hope is lost, Wesley Crusher shows up and conjures up all 7 of the old Enterprises, i.e. including those that were destroyed because magic, and the TNG crew, each captaining one of the Enterprises, team up to beat her. That is my attempt at what I think you would think is the worst possible series finale for Star Trek Picard, i.e. just nothing but unconnected fan service. What do you think? Bravo. Bravo. If your goal was to outline what I would think would be the worst possible final episode for Picard, oh, buddy, that's great. I'm not saying that you couldn't come up with anything worse or that anybody couldn't come up with anything worse than that, but that's pretty fucking terrible. Yeah, that's good, meaning bad. It's good how bad you were able to make that. Yes. Nicely done. Nicely done. And I will also say, if that episode did actually happen, my God, how much fun would it be to review that thing with Jason? Oh, Jason and I would have such a great time reviewing that episode if that is how it ended. It would be worth the episode being that bad to get to do that review. Yeah, for sure. Matthew Gretzinger, and I forgot to delete the question part. There you go. Matthew Gretzinger. Hi, Steve. I very much enjoyed your recent Superman Imaginary ending video and your retro review of DS9's The Visitor. I'm trying to anticipate what episode of Enterprise is going to be your favorite. If you have one, any hints? But to my real question, I've noticed in reviewing some of your older content that one of my favorite of your regular features doesn't seem to occur anymore, and I wondered if you were done with it. I'm thinking of your analyses of religious texts from an atheist perspective. Are you still interested in this subject, or have you, 1, run out of suitable texts to critique, or 2, moved on from atheism or new atheism as a subject of interest? It's a bit of a personal question, so I hope it's not a step too far. As someone who veers from atheism to agnosticism myself, and as someone who is disenchanted with the great figures of new atheism, Dawkins, etc., and who values your opinion, I wonder where you stand. Thanks. Well, I can give you a hint as to what my favorite Enterprise episode is, but I feel like if I give you the hint, it'll just give it away. So I will give you I'll give you the hint that won't give it away. but the hint that doesn't give it away might be too broad, so it'll end up being useless to you, but I'll say it anyway. Um, there's some astronaut shit in it. There's like some crew members wearing spacesuits going outside the ship doing astronaut shit in my favorite Enterprise episode. Um, and as for the atheism stuff, I am still an atheist. I still consider myself an atheist. I still have all the same thoughts and feelings about atheism and religion that I expressed certainly in my more recent atheism videos. Um, so I haven't like moved on from it as far as that goes. Um, I stopped doing the atheist reads videos because not so much that I ran out of suitable texts, just that all of the Christian apologetics texts that I reviewed in those series were more or less the same. It was the same arguments being made in more or less the same ways by different authors. And it just got to the point where I, the, the challenge of finding new and creative ways to respond to the same arguments was starting to wear thin for me. And I feared that that my shows responding to them were starting to get repetitive. And I wanted to stop doing it before I started to hate it. So I decided ahead of time that the last year was going to be the last year, and I picked out the books I was going to do that year as intentionally as like my final. I think I did my final 4, and I stopped before I got sick of it, and I think that was the right decision. I am also very disillusioned with the great figures of new atheism. I am no fan of Richard Dawkins. I am no fan of Sam Harris. I feel like they have both sullied whatever legacy they may have had due to, like in Dawkins' case, as a great science communicator. I feel like their shitty political opinions and poorly informed takes on any number of things have, certainly wrecked whatever admiration I had for them. And, Christopher Hitchens was always the thing about Hitchens was the smartest of all of them and was the best writer by far of all of them. But he was always problematic. Like you knew going in with Hitchens that he had some chauvinism and some sexism and some shitty beliefs about any number of things. And so it didn't really come as a surprise. You sort of it's kind of like not quite separating the art from the artist, but just realizing like, okay, this guy, for all of the impressive things about him and for all of the good things about him, there's a lot of baggage here. There's a lot of stuff that, if you want to read him and appreciate him, you're going to have to just kind of be aware of this, so, he certainly was not was not flawless either by any stretch of the imagination. So, I am not someone who would want to consider myself a new atheist or associate with new atheism, because I think that's kind of a tainted label at this point and has been for some time. But I'm still an atheist. And every once in a while, like if I do get the itch sometimes, and if I can come up with a concept for a video, or if such a concept comes along and sort of suggests itself, if the muse speaks to me, and I come up with an idea for an atheist themed video, there's no reason why I would not want to do that. Like I would totally do it. But I just don't know what that is at this point. I don't have an idea for that right now. But if I come up with something, I would certainly do. I would not, refuse or draw a line and say I will not do any more atheism related content in the future. I definitely would. I just don't know what that would be at this point. So yeah, thanks for the question. Joe McClory, Profit and Lace is a great example of a silly idea episode that just didn't work. What is your favorite example of one that did or didn't work, but steered into the skid to make a really entertaining episode? My faves like this are Bride of Chaotica and The Magnificent Ferengi. And although I think it is probably a worse episode than Profit and Lace, I kind of love Sub Rosa for just how goofy it is. Well, I mentioned it earlier. I think Genesis falls into that category. I think if you try to uh, play it straight or interpret it straight, Genesis is a terrible episode. But if you watch it with kind of a mystery science theater mindset and you just turn off your brain and have fun with it, it's a gas. Like it's so much fun to watch. And there are a lot of Star Trek episodes that are like one of my favorite Deep Space Nine episodes, in terms of how much fun it is to watch, is Dramatis Personae. I don't think I would call that like a great episode, as I normally reckon such things, but in terms of just fun to watch, holy shit, that's great. Same thing with Move Along Home. Everybody talks shit about Move Along Home. Everybody's like, Move Along Home, one of the worst episodes of Star Trek ever. Like, seriously? I love that episode. Is it like great in the same way that The Visitor is great, or In the Pale Moonlight is great? No, of course not. It's nowhere close to that kind of great. Not even close. But it's so much fun to watch. Like, it's just a hoot. Like, how can you have a bad time watching that episode? I don't understand it. So yeah, those are some examples. And I think there are a bunch of Star Trek episodes like that, where they are failures on one level, but they are successes on another level, because they are bad in a delightfully silly way that is just so entertaining. I would much rather watch episodes like that than watch episodes, like Turnabout Intruder or Code of Honor, or, episodes like that where they're just like, ugh, and you can't really enjoy them on any level. I would much rather have an enjoyably bad or goofy episode. John Burns, hey Steve, hydrate. In a previous Ask Away, I tried to explain that Martin Scorsese disliked superhero movies because they weren't real. Here's an example of my point. In Casino, there's a scene where Robert De Niro is having some blueberry muffins with another character in the movie. Robert De Niro's character was based on an actual person. And the reason the blueberry muffin scene was in the movie was because the person the character was based on was someone who got upset noticing his muffins didn't have as many blueberries as the other characters. So he went to the chef in his hotel and insisted on the same number of blueberries in every muffin. The chef's response, do you know how long that's going to take? That's what Martin Scorsese was talking about when he said real movies based on real people. Understand? Oh, and good thing George's last name wasn't Horrid. Hoary Skywalker? Interesting, yeah. Luke. Horrid, Hoary. Although Hoary Skywalker, maybe that's an ancestor of Luke. Maybe he has like a great granddaddy Hoary or something. No, I get it. I mean, the thing is, those authentic details can exist in movies of any genre. Like, there's no reason why you couldn't take a little character detail like that, like, the guy insisting on all the muffins having the same number of blueberries. There's no reason why you couldn't use that as part of a completely fictional character. Like, you could make that part of a character quirk in a superhero character. Like, there's no reason you couldn't do that. And in fact, fiction writers do that sort of thing all the time in many, many different genres. So if that's the only problem that Martin, and I would also point out, Martin Scorsese has made films where the characters are not actually based on real people. And in most of Scorsese's films, even if the characters are based on real people, there are creative liberties taken. They're not, he's not making 100% true to life reenactments of things that happen. Like Goodfellas is not a documentary. Casino is not a documentary. Raging Bull is not a documentary. If you want to know everything that happened in the real life of the real Jake LaMotta, don't watch Raging Bull. Read a book. Do some research on your own. Right? If you want to see a great film that is inspired by the life of Jake LaMotta, that takes the life of Jake LaMotta as a starting point and crafts a cinematic masterpiece around it, based on it, by all means, Raging Bull, brilliant film. One of the great films of the 1980s, maybe the greatest film of the 1980s. Based on a true story, goes well beyond the bounds of the true story, both in terms of its literal content and in terms of its artistic presentation. So, I mean, look, Martin Scorsese can have whatever opinion he wants. Martin Scorsese cannot like superhero movies for any reason he wants. He's entitled, just like everybody else is. And if anything, he's more entitled because he's Martin Scorsese. I don't have to agree with him. I don't have to think he's right, but he's entitled to think whatever he wants for whatever reason he wants. But for me personally, if the reason is, well, I like movies that are based on real people, I don't think that just doesn't hold water with me. But I understand it. If the point is, do I understand? Yes, I understand. But it doesn't really cut any ice with me. Shazy, hey Steve, I'm trying to educate some of my more conservative-minded family members to believe in science and listen to experts' advice for a given issue. However, the argument that always seems to pop up is the like of course they would say that, they're paid to, or they want to protect their careers. Do you have any advice on how to combat this profit motive logical fallacy that people employ? Seems to me that you could apply that to anything that contradicts your worldview. Thank you. Well, yes, that's the main problem with it. It is a form of creating an unfalsifiable argument. And the problem with an unfalsifiable argument is that there's no way of ever knowing whether it's true or false, because by the very nature of the argument, it resists falsification and verification. You just sort of have decided that it's true, and nothing can ever convince you that it's not true. Or if you have just decided that something isn't true, there's nothing that can ever convince you that it is true, because you'll just dismiss any challenge to your position. That is what is fallacious about it. There's no way that logic can interact with it. And look, if your conservative relatives don't care about that, then I guess pointing that out to them won't make much of a difference. But you could also say, like, speaking about science in particular, like, let's take a big scientific issue. Let's take climate change, which is not remotely controversial, but certain people on the right side of politics have spent many, many years trying to convince people that it is controversial, even though it's not. The scientific consensus right now says that climate change is real, it is significant, and it is significantly influenced by human activity. That, in broad terms, is the scientific consensus on climate change. So someone like your conservative relative might say, oh, sure, well, the scientists who say that are being paid to say that. Or the scientists who say that, really, they know that that's not true, but they're continuing to further that narrative, because if they admitted they were wrong, it would hurt their careers. If you, as a scientist, are able to present compelling evidence that overturns what up to that point is a scientific consensus, there is no reason why you would not want to do that. Not just because the scientific ethos is about finding what's true, and if you discover evidence that disproves a broadly held, long-held consensus in science, your ethics as a scientist demand that you present it and that you challenge that consensus, that status quo. Leaving that aside, let's assume that all scientists are unprincipled and they don't really care about what's true or not, and the scientific ethos is just words and it doesn't mean anything to them. Purely in financial terms, in commercial terms, in terms of what's best for your career, if you get to be the scientist who finds the evidence and presents the evidence that proves conclusively, compellingly, that climate change actually isn't a problem, do you have any idea how revolutionary that would be? I remember having a similar argument years ago, speaking of my atheist days, making the same argument about creationism and evolution. Evolution is the unifying theory of biology. It is the most fundamental theory in all of the life sciences. It is virtually universally accepted among professionals in the life sciences. It's one of the most widely used and well-established scientific theories that has ever been devised. And there's no reason why, if a scientist discovered compelling evidence that showed that actually evolution isn't true, actually evolution isn't a good theory, actually there's this other theory that's even better that we should be using to understand the natural world instead of evolution, there is no reason why that scientist would not want to share that evidence. Because if that evidence turned out to be good, if that evidence turned out to be as persuasive and as compelling as the scientist thinks it is, that scientist is the new Albert Einstein. That scientist is the new Isaac Newton. That scientist is the one who gets to kick off a new scientific revolution. Why in the world would they want to not do that? Imagine scientists are as unprincipled and as money-minded as possible. Why would that scientist not want to do that? It makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. So maybe that argument would be persuasive to your conservative friends. The money is in overthrowing the consensus. The money is in being the hero, being the agitator, being the revolutionary, being the Albert Einstein, being the guy who comes in and says, actually, all this stuff is wrong. We've gotten it all wrong all these years. And here is the evidence to prove it. Here is the evidence that I have discovered that will show you all that I'm right and you're wrong. And we have to flip all of this around because of what I have discovered. There's no reason why any scientist would not want to share that. So there you go. Dana, who hopes to return full force for her birthday. Well, you've got, what, 3 weeks, right? A little over 3 weeks to get back to full force. Happy Friday, Steve. You've talked previously about how voting is still worthwhile, even though it doesn't immediately result in the changes that we want. Incremental change is change, after all, but as Geek often points out, living within that slow change where things aren't the way we want them sometimes is very frustrating and even painful. And even painful ways is incredibly difficult. Sometimes I read that wrong, Dana, I'm sorry. Sometimes in very frustrating and even painful ways is incredibly difficult. That's the challenge of living within a republic, of course, the public. Last week, I went to Atlanta to meet with some of our elected officials at the state level, and our county Democratic group is trying to organize a rally for civil discourse that will have a speaker who responds to questions from a panel of Republicans and Democrats. Basically, how do we change people's attitudes and actions? Is effort like this a waste of resources? What other suggestions do you have? Should we join Geek in fomenting revolution? To conclude, thoughts? I do think it is worth trying to change people's attitudes and actions, but the attitudes that need to be changed are attitudes like my vote doesn't count, both parties are the same, elections don't matter. And the actions that need to be changed are people who, if they did vote, would vote for the Democratic candidate, the more progressive candidate, not voting. I do think it's a waste of time to reach out to Republicans. I do think it's a waste of time to reach out to conservatives and to try to flip them. I just think that is a waste of time. I think that's a losing effort. Not to say that there aren't any Republicans who can't be persuaded, not to say that there aren't any cases of conservatives seeing the light and becoming progressives. Of course, that has happened many times. But has it happened enough times that it's worth being a major focus of outreach for the Democratic Party or for progressive activists in general? No, I don't think it's that. I don't think it happens that frequently. I don't think we can count on it happening frequently enough to make it worth a massive organized effort. I think what we need to focus on are people who are more or less already on our side ideologically, who don't vote out of apathy or don't vote because they think that there aren't any meaningful differences between Republicans and Democrats, or don't vote because they find it difficult to vote because of where they live, or because they have to work certain hours or whatever. I think what needs to change is we need to make voting more accessible for everybody, and we need to find ways to inspire people who don't vote, either because they can't or because they could but they choose not to. Inspire those people to vote, and to vote for us, to vote for Democrats. And if they are going to vote for Democrats, to take part in the primary process and vote for the most progressive Democrats that are on the ballot, to try and push the party further to the left than it is. I think all of that is much more important and much more worthwhile, and hopefully will be much more productive in yielding of greater results than trying to reach out and flip some Republicans. Fuck Republicans. Fuck conservatives. I don't give a fuck if a single goddamn one of them votes for a Democrat. If we did our job in getting our base to the polls and getting people who are already ideologically aligned with us to join our base and go to the polls, we wouldn't need to flip a single goddamn Republican in this country. Now, I don't mean to say that every single district in the country would turn blue. I don't think that's the case. Unfortunately, I think the district where you live, Dana, in Georgia, is probably going to be a Republican district for a long fucking time, no matter what we do. I think my district in Maryland, my congressional district in Maryland, were it not gerrymandered, would probably be Republican for a very, very long time. And I don't think there's really anything I could do about that, because I just think there are more Republicans that live in this area than Democrats. And that's just the way it is. And hopefully that could change in the long term. But in the short term, over the next several election cycles, it's probably just going to be the way it is. But nationally, I think we could easily have comfortable Democratic majorities in the House of Representatives and the Senate, and in the state legislatures of probably a majority of the states, if we were just able to activate the lapsed or the apathetic Democratic voters or potential Democratic voters that are already there, instead of trying to flip Republicans. The Democratic obsession with reaching across the aisle and trying to flip Republicans is one of the most aggravating things to me about modern day American politics. It is a waste of time. Anyway, that's what I think. Jacob Monroe. Hello, Steve. I've always been a big fan of football. It's always given me something to bond with my dad, who I otherwise have little in common with, and I just really enjoy watching it. I've kept watching it even with the concussion lawsuit, the blacklisting of Colin Kaepernick, and everything involving Dan Snyder. Even though I know there are plenty of reasons for me to walk away, I think I haven't been able to, because I haven't found anything to fill that hole with, especially since the NFL holds a virtual monopoly on the sport. So if I'm not able to give up the sport entirely, it's either the NFL or an obscure, highly inferior alternative. This has made me think about wrestling. AEW seems to be going the way of TNA. Ring of Honor is now a zombie promotion. NWA dove back into obscurity, and Impact is Impact. Is lack of an alternative a factor in why you started watching WWE again? Did having good AEW / Ring of Honor make it easier to stay away? Yes, definitely. The fact that AEW has recently begun to feel like TNA with a better, or Impact now, Impact with a better TV time slot, has definitely been a factor. Yes, I haven't really enjoyed AEW since probably before last summer. I think it has really gone downhill creatively, and certain things have also, I mean, it always has had its creative problems. I think there have always been things about Tony Khan's choices as a booker that have rubbed me the wrong way, that have made me roll my eyes and go, what are you doing? Since the beginning, I've noticed that. it got worse when Cody left, because Cody Rhodes is my favorite wrestler. And the fact that Cody, even though a lot of Cody's AEW stuff in the months leading up to his departure sucked, and that was probably mostly Cody's fault, the fact that Cody was not in the company anymore was a factor in me losing interest. CM Punk not being there anymore is a factor in me losing interest. The general shitty storytelling from top to bottom is a factor in me losing interest. If AEW was a lot better, yes, I probably would feel less drawn to check out WWE every once in a while, for sure. Yeah. It also doesn't, and same with Ring of Honor. And I do watch the New Japan product. New Japan does have a TV show on Access TV that's an hour a week that is composed of matches taken from their major events. And I do watch that most weeks, and I do enjoy that for the most part. So, I mean, I do have alternatives to WWE that I still watch that for the most part, enjoy. But AEW turning into kind of a shit pile is a factor in me watching WWE some more. And the fact that actually, even though I usually only watch NXT and SmackDown as far as WWE these days, and NXT is not nearly as good as it was when I stopped watching in 2016, but it's gradually starting to sort of build itself back up and become a more watchable, more interesting show. And SmackDown, there's the Bloodline storyline with Sammy and Roman and the Usos that has been fantastic. And there are a couple of wrestlers on SmackDown, like Gunther, formerly Walter, that I think are great, that I enjoy watching. But for the most part, I mean, WWE isn't all that great either, but it has things in it that are better than anything that AEW has done for a very long time. And it has Cody, like my favorite wrestler's there now. And he's wrestling in the main event of WrestleMania for the world title. And he's probably, unless they're completely out of their minds, he's probably going to win the world title. So like, that's exciting. So yeah, if AEW had anything remotely that interesting or exciting going on, I would probably be a lot less inclined to watch WWE. For sure. For sure. And last question from Russell, who says, "Hey, Steve, how are you? I'm going to do a simple Q&A today since I need sleep and I have to work tonight. First week back since my surgery. And by the way, I hope your recovery is going well, Russell. Anyway, here goes. I've noticed on several YouTube forums that Star Trek fans, including someone you personally have worked with, stating that they rank TOS high. I also saw a tweet where you said you rank it as your top 3 of Trek shows. My question is this. While I too rank it high, I often wonder, is it because of a nostalgia factor, or is it because overall it's a wonderful series? While there are several TOS episodes I adore, more often than not, there are the duds in terms of quality. I myself am a huge DS9 fan through and through, goes without saying. I guess I'm asking this because I often wonder what today's generation would view TOS as. Like I said, fun question. And no doubt, I love me some TOS. Finally, what are some of your favorite moments from that series? Oh, and also, why couldn't TAS capture some of the glory that was TOS? Thanks for your channel. Well, thank you for the question and for your support as always, Russell. And like I said, I hope your recovery from surgery is going well. I mean, for me, I would hesitate to say it's nostalgia for me personally, because I was born in 1980. So like, I don't have nostalgia. And if I have nostalgia for anything, it would be TNG and the classic series movies, because that was the first Star Trek I ever really got into. I saw some TOS when I was growing up, but not nearly as much as the movies or TNG. I didn't really get into TOS and like actually get to sit down and watch all of the episodes, or most of the episodes, until I was mid to late teens, and I saw them on the Sci-Fi Channel. And then eventually they came out on DVD and stuff, and I got to watch them that way. But no, I think I enjoy TOS for the most part on what I perceive to be its merit. And yeah, there are a lot of TOS episodes that are rotten, but think about this. I say it's top 3 for me. I said my top 3 Star Trek shows were Deep Space Nine, Next Gen, and original series. What are the other options? Is TOS better than Enterprise? I think so. Pretty easily. That's not even a difficult choice. Is TOS better than Voyager? Again, an even easier choice, for sure. Is TOS better than any of the current shows? Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Prodigy, Lower Decks. The only one that gives it a run for its money in my mind is Strange New Worlds, and Strange New Worlds has only had one 10-episode season. It was an excellent season, but are 10 really good episodes and a couple of like fantastic classic episodes in those 10, like, is that enough for me to rank a series ahead of Star Trek, the original series? No, it's not. So I, just based on a limited sample size, if nothing else, I wouldn't want to put Strange New Worlds ahead of TOS. So for me, it's the only choice. And I'm not saying that to say like it's not actually that good. I love Star Trek, the original series. I love it. But even if I didn't love it as much as I do, it doesn't have to be, like one of the greatest shows of all time. It just has to be better than the other Star Trek shows besides Deep Space Nine and TNG. And to me, like, that's not even, at this point, that's not even a contest, So, yeah. And why did TAS not capture some of the glory? I mean, it was an animated series produced for Saturday morning in the mid-70s. Animation was not considered a serious artistic medium at the time, certainly not television animation. So, I mean, I don't think it was really ever intended or destined to be, anything great. I think in its own way, the animated series is wonderful, and I'm glad that it's there, and I wouldn't want to not have it. And I think at its very best, with an episode like Yesteryear, I think it maybe just kind of grazes the bottom of the glory of TOS. But for the most part, it's, it's a kid's cartoon show made for Saturday morning. It's relatively cheap. It is what it is. I don't think it's necessarily a strike against it that it wasn't as good of a show as Star Trek, the original series. It's just kind of the nature of the thing that it was, So anyway, thank you for the question. That was the last of the patron and member questions. And I am going to turn to the live chat here in a minute. But first, before I turn to the live chat, and I see a couple of super chats have collected that I will get to as soon as we get past this next bit, because the next bit, before I turn to the live chat, is the premiere of a new Stuffy and Friends short. Now, as always, this short that I'm about to show you will go up as a standalone YouTube short on my channel tomorrow in square format as a short, but you get to see the full frame version here tonight in just a second. So here is now, without further ado, the brand new Stuffy and Friends short. Please do enjoy.
If I were to find myself with 2 free passes for Hershey Park this summer, would you want to go with me, or should I ask someone else? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's okay. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just... You seemed really lost in thought just now. Is there something on your mind?
I was thinking about how if you have sex with someone who's 2 years younger than you, that means that when you were a freshman in high school, they were a 7th grader.
Okay. And?
That shit ain't right.
Not at those ages, but once they're both adults, it's not a problem. Right?
Is Hershey Park where they have those waffle ice cream sandwiches?
I think that's Knoebels.
I'll have to get back to you. There you go. New Stuffy short. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay. Now let me turn to the live chat for the remainder of the show. And let me get these super chats that a few of you were kind enough to share with me, taken care of first. There's um, a member message from Oasis who says, follow up on Michael's peanut butter question. What's the best brand? Me, I'm a Jif kind of guy, and it has nothing to do with how I pronounce Jif. I am also a Jif guy, actually. I've tried other brands, and actually remember last year when there was like a supply chain thing and peanut butter was tough to get. Um, I did have to subsist on Peter Pan for a few months until my grocery store got Jif back in stock. But yeah, for the most part, I'm a Jif guy. I have a Jif, natural or like all natural Jif is what I have in my cupboard right now. So yeah. Um, Also, there's a super chat from John Burns who says Jacob Monroe could always check out the CFL. No one would ever mistake them for a league of millionaires. Thousandaires, maybe. Yes, the Canadian Football League, possible alternative to the NFL. And also here's a super chat from Isaiah Taylor who says, just watched your takedown on late seating of Pretty Woman. Man, I couldn't stop laughing. It was a laugh a minute. I'm actually going to listen to it after the stream, and now I'm going to buy it on VHS. So you listened to our very negative review of Pretty Woman, and your response is, I'm going to go buy that movie. Okay, well, I'm glad. I hope you enjoy it. And here's one from 255 AD. When you're like 6 and your mom tells you why you can't buy something you want, and all you can say is, but I really, really want it. That's how I keep imagining it would. That's how I keep imagining would be allies who still want to buy this game. All they can say is, but I really, really want it, like a whiny small child. Get what I mean? I think you have stated the situation exactly right. I think that is very much how it is. Yes, I think that's a good way to put it. Okay, let me go back and see some of these other questions that I have missed. I'm glad. It seems like people liked the stuffy short. I'm glad. Oh, Tahoe, Nevada, non-Trek related question. Are you watching The Last of Us? If so, thoughts? Yes, I am watching The Last of Us. I think it's fantastic so far. I've really, really enjoyed it. I have been pleased to see how I have been pleased to see how well structured the story has been as the season has proceeded. They have kind of been following the pattern that I think is a good way to tell stories in a serialized or semi-serialized format. You'll notice that in episode what was it, episode 5, episode 6, I think it was episode 6, when they got to Jackson, where they kind of paid off the Joel looking for his brother thing, right? They didn't wait till the end of the show to pay that off. They paid that off with several episodes to go, which I thought was great. And I mean, God, the performances are great. Pedro Pascal is fantastic. Bella Ramsey is fantastic. The characters are wonderful. It's super well written, super well acted. It's great. It's it's great. I've enjoyed it tremendously so far. Steve Schmaling says, enjoying your retro reviews. Curious what's next. Least favorite episodes. So after I get through with the favorite episodes, the next grouping I think that I have planned are episodes that feature characters, or in one case, actors, or an actor from previous shows. So for the TNG episodes, it'll be TNG episodes where classic Trek characters appeared. And then for there's an Enterprise episode I'm going to review. Actually, I think it'll wind up being like 3 Enterprise episodes I'm going to review, where it'll be the episodes that Brent Spiner guest starred, not as Data or Dr. Sung or Lore, but as another Sung character. So that's the theme for the next batch. There's episodes featuring guest stars from previous series. And then after that, because I do plan these things ahead, I think after that, and that'll be another 6-episode batch. And then after that will be Borg episodes. So those are the two sort of runs I have coming up for the retro reviews. Lena Morgan says there's a Wrath of Khan musical going off Broadway in a couple of months. Thoughts? If it's as good as Wrath of Khan the opera on Robot Chicken, then I'm all for it. Because that's Wrath of Khan the opera is maybe my favorite Robot Chicken sketch they ever did. I imagine and I have not heard about this, but I imagine the Wrath of Khan musical will be quite different than that. But yeah, I'm curious, but I have no thoughts about it specifically because I just found out about it just now when I read your question. Sequence 77, Steve, do you feel that being a critic makes you better able to take criticism yourself? Each of your reviews get a lot of feedback, and I'm wondering if you ever find it particularly constructive. Sometimes, yeah. And I do think being a critic in general, not just me personally, but I think being a critic and understanding what a critic does, I think can make you more open to criticism of your own work and of your own behavior, whatever. I do think because a critic's job is not to hate on things. A critic's job is not to tell you why something is bad. A critic's job is to, if we're talking about film or TV, a critic's job is to watch the thing, decide how they feel about it, and then articulate that to their readers or to their audience. That's a critic's job. So if you like it or you don't like it, or there are things about it that you like and things about it you don't like, your job is to articulate those in a meaningful, coherent way to your audience. And when you understand that, and you understand that it is not an inherently positive or negative thing, it's not your job to be a cheerleader or to be a hater. It's your job to be honest about how you feel about it, whatever that is. Then it makes you open to criticism from other people that is offered in good faith and is constructive, because you understand that it's not a personal attack, that they're not telling you that you suck, and they're also not filleting you and telling you you're the greatest thing ever. It's an honest opinion from another person about something that they think you did right or something that they think you did wrong. And if it's offered in that way and received in that way, then it overall it's a good thing. So I do think it helps. Yes. Kane 20C deathmatch time, edgy comic guy edition, Garth Ennis versus Alan Moore. I would keep Alan Moore. All due respect to Garth Ennis, who is a great writer, I would have to keep Alan Moore in that scenario. Yeah. Let me see. Jacques says the Stuffy short was fun. How did you get such a grumpy doggy? Oh, Stuffy's not grumpy. I don't know if he came across as grumpy in that or not, but no, as a rule, Stuffy is not grumpy at all. I think Stuffy is much less grumpy, generally speaking, than my character in those videos. Dana says, but can you imagine how fantastic the season finale of Picard would be if each episode improved as much as 3.2 did from 3.1? Oh my God. If it was like if it was like an exponential thing, where like every subsequent episode was as much better than the previous episode as episode 2 was of episode 1, like, my God, by episode 4 it would be the greatest Star Trek show ever. By episode 10 it would be the greatest television show ever produced. It would be a miracle. Like, it would be historic. People would be weeping in the streets over how brilliant and moving and fantastic and just what an artistic triumph it was. Yes. Anonymous Science, with regards to the question about Star Trek family planning, it is worth noting that Sisko mentions he missed his contraceptive injection in the episode The Dogs of War. You know what? Yeah. I had forgotten about that, but now that you mention it, I do remember that. I think that might be the only time that has even been mentioned. So at least Deep Space Nine was smart enough to acknowledge the problem, you know. Of course, Deep Space Nine was the one that did it. 25580, what do you think you and Jason would say about my hypothetical episode? Well, like I sort of hinted in answering the question, I think we would both hate the episode, but we would love talking about it. It would be a ton of fun to review. It would be a ton of fun to watch together. But as an episode, I think we would both think it was terrible. But as an experience, it would be wonderful. Daryl Lett says, okay, Steve, someone in the chat brought up flat earthers earlier. How can anyone be a flat earther? Water, cloud, and wind behavior would be impossible if the earth were flat. I don't know. Willful ignorance. Determined, gritty, willful ignorance. Isaiah Taylor, what I would do is watch it on my CRT TV stoned and make fun of it because it does sound silly. Well, that does sound like the ideal way to watch Pretty Woman for sure. Steve Schmeling, Wrath of Khan the Opera is much better in the original Klingon. Well, it would be, wouldn't it? Philip Kehoe, so Poker Face is really good. I watched episode 9 today. I like when the bad guy thinks they've gotten away with it, but we, the audience, can see the comeuppance coming. Yeah, the most recent episode was really good. Episode 9 was maybe the best episode since the premiere, and maybe the best episode so far. Like, I thought it was really well done. I love the way the pieces come together. I think that's become the joy of the show to me, because like I've mentioned a couple times earlier talking about it, strictly speaking, it is not a murder mystery because you see the murder and you see who does it at the beginning of every episode. So the solution as far as the crime is never a mystery. But it's seeing how all the different pieces fit together that is the pleasure of the show. And the most recent episode was really, really well done as far as that goes. I liked it a lot. And I liked the show in general a lot. You know what, Lisa? Gul Dukat is not my favorite Star Trek character, but he's way up there. I mean, I think he's a horrible person. Like, you know, I think he's he's a terrible, terrible person. He's evil as fuck. But he's a splendid character. My God, he's a great character. David Colby says, I've been rereading Watchmen. Did you know a multiple award-winning best comic of all time comic is actually really fucking good? Who knew? Well, I knew. I read it years ago, and I agree. I think Watchmen is a masterpiece. It is. I mean, you're right. When things get so hyped like that, often just because of the level of hype, when you finally find them, you know, or when you watch them, if you don't get to them when they first come out, when the hype is first building, they can often be disappointing just because they've been built up that much. But for me, like, I mean, I didn't read Watchmen I think I read Watchmen for the first time in the year 2000, and it came out in 86. So, you know, and I knew it by reputation before I finally sat down and read it. And I did not find it disappointing at all. I thought it was brilliant. So yeah, every once in a while, something that is touted as that good does turn out to actually be that good. Yeah. Let me see. Oh, Kara, I talked about this recently. I did a video. One of my retro reviews in the last couple weeks was about this. If I had to pick a favorite TOS episode, what would it be? Amok Time. Easily Amok Time. I mean, there are so many great TOS episodes. But if I had to pick a favorite, it's Amok Time. Yeah. Fadeaway X says there's some chatter that Disco was axed to bring in a new series. If you could wave a wand, what era setting would you choose for a new show? If I were making a show and I were able to make it whatever I wanted, it would be early 25th century, like post TNG movies, you know, like around the era that Picard is currently set in. I would do that because that's pretty much a completely blank slate. Although, like I said earlier, it really doesn't matter. If I were writing a Star Trek show, it wouldn't make a difference to me what era it was set in, because my show would not have all that many connections to other shows. Like, I would do my show and tell my stories with my characters, and it would not be about throwing Easter eggs at people, you know? So it could be TOS era, it could be TOS movie era, it could be TNG era, it could be, 32nd century with Discovery series, seasons 3 and 4 and 5. It wouldn't, the era would not matter. Because I would tell the story I wanted to tell, and my show would be my show. But if I had to pick, I would say probably it would be better to do it, in the Picard or immediately post Picard era, just because that's, a blank slate. Although I think I as far as I know, I haven't heard anything to the contrary. As far as I know, the next show, or at least one of the next shows, is going to be that Michelle Yeoh Section 31 show. And I'm not sure precisely what era that is going to be set in. So I guess we'll have to see. Lena Morgan says, what one legacy character would you most want for Picard season 3, and which one would you least want? Like, what cameo would make you see red? I don't want any more legacy characters than are already going to be there. They're already bringing back the entire TNG crew. That's enough. I don't want any more legacy characters. Any legacy characters beyond the TNG crew coming back would not make me see red. Like, I wouldn't actually be angry about it, but would make me roll my eyes and go, oh, come on. No, I don't want any more legacy characters. They've already, like, the legacy characters are built into the show. So bringing in more legacy characters at this point is just pandering. It's just overkill. You're already bringing back everybody. You're bringing back Riker again. You're bringing back Troy again. You're bringing back Worf for the first time since the movies. You're bringing back Dr. Crusher for the first time since the movies. You're bringing back Geordi. You're bringing back Brent Spiner as Lore. When you already brought him back as Data for some reason in season 1, now you're bringing him back as Lore for season 3. That's enough. That's enough. So no, I don't want any more legacy characters. And going forward, and as they do additional shows and stuff, no more legacy characters. If I suddenly got Alex Kurtzman's job, if the Blue Fairy came down and said, you are now running Star Trek, rule number 1, day number 1, as soon as I get into the office, I'm having an all hands on deck meeting of all my producers and all my writers, and I'm saying no more legacy characters. If they're already in the show, or they're already in your plans before I got here, that's fine. I'm not asking you to, clear the decks and go back to square one. But from here on out, no more legacy characters, period. No exceptions. Radical Bacon, would you hug Buzz Aldrin? I would love to hug Buzz Aldrin if he was accepting hugs. Yes, of course. Anonymous Science says, with regards to the question about Let That Be Your Last Battlefield, Voyager's retrospect is another example where the intended message and the execution are miles apart. Yeah, is that the one where they kind of accidentally make a really shitty sexual assault episode with 7 of 9? Yeah. John 73 John says, not a question, but I want to thank you for your political videos. I was always atheist and liberal, but you've helped me understand and justify the reasons for my beliefs. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad I could do that for you. I appreciate that. Here's a super chat from All Mod Cons. Thank you very much. You've mentioned the 180-degree rule. but I don't know what it is. Yeah, I could Google it, but I would rather pay you to explain. Okay, I love answering questions like this. Okay, so the 180-degree rule is a concept in cinematography that says that when you are shooting a scene where two characters, it can be two characters or it can be two sides or whatever. Let's just simplify it and say you're shooting a scene where two characters are having a conversation and you are cutting back and forth between shots of these two characters. So the 180-degree rule says that in order for these shots to make the most sense to the viewer and to be the most visually clear and pleasing to the viewer, you should draw a line between the two subjects that you're cutting back and forth between and the position of the camera. And the camera should never go on the other side of that line. Or put another way, imagine that your two people having a conversation are facing each other. Draw an imaginary line between the two of them. Okay, so they are 2 points on a line. The camera must always stay on the same side of that line. So when the camera is shooting this person over here, the camera is on this side of the line. Okay, when the camera cuts to a shot of this person over here, the camera doesn't move to the other side. The camera stays on this side and just goes like that. So you're cutting back and forth from this shot to this shot, and the camera is always on this side, is always on the same side of the line. That's the 180-degree rule. And when you break the 180-degree rule, which some directors do, sometimes intentionally for a creative reason or an aesthetic reason, and sometimes just because they don't know any better or they do it by accident without realizing they've done it. I've done that a few times because I'm hardly an expert filmmaker. I've done it in Steve and Stuffy videos before where I realize, oh shit, the camera was over here when it should have been over here. And sometimes I've been able to correct for it and sometimes I haven't been, but it is what it is. When you break the 180-degree rule, that is known as crossing the line. And another way of expressing the 180-degree rule is saying, don't cross the line. You draw the line between the two subjects, you put the camera on one side or the other, and once you've done that, you don't cross the line. You stay on the same side of the line. That is the 180-degree rule. Thank you for asking, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share one of the relatively few things I know about when it comes to filmmaking. Kara Hughes, who is your favorite Star Trek character? Who is my favorite Star Trek character? Probably Captain Sisko, I would say. Yeah, Captain Sisko is my favorite. Yeah, Jacob Monroe, speaking of Watchmen, Zack Snyder's one good movie, the one where he could just copy and paste everything. He still kind of missed the point of it, but yeah, it's far and away Zack Snyder's best movie. Yeah. Yeah, Dana, thanks to a conversation with you, I decided if I ever got the magical call from Paramount and they said, we're pulling you in, kid, you can do a Star Trek show, my Star Trek show would be Wagon Train to the Stars. Kara, I mean, like I said, it depends. If I were doing a show, I would not be interested in doing a show that had anything to do with the Dominion War. So if I were doing a Star Trek show and for some reason the studio said we would like this show to take place during the Dominion War, I would say great, as long as you don't mind if my show has nothing directly to do with the Dominion War at all. Like I would not want to do a Dominion War show. And I really, just sitting here thinking about it, I'm not all that interested in a Dominion War show. Like if somebody else did it, that doesn't interest me. We had a Dominion War show. It was called The Last 3 Years of Deep Space Nine. And it was great, but we did that. So I don't want another Dominion War show. And I certainly wouldn't want to do one, but if it was set during that era, but it was about other stuff, And maybe the war was kind of happening in the background, and occasionally you might hear about it, or occasionally it might intersect in a way with, the stories of the show, but the show itself was not really about the Dominion War. I think, that could be fine. Let me see. Dana says, so should people in districts like mine give up on elections in their own communities and focus their efforts elsewhere? Well, no, not necessarily, because how else is it ever going to change? I mean, it's not going to change in the short term, but I still think like your local Democratic Party should be active and should be doing stuff for sure, but I don't think their efforts should be focused on flipping Republicans into Democrats. Oh, Fadeaway X, please. Oh, God, I hope Cisco doesn't show up in the Picard season finale. Good Lord. Greg Cervantes, plan to do retrospectives on TNG novels. I have a couple of ideas that would be about some of the novels, but I don't plan on doing that like as a regular thing. No. But I do have some potential future topics that do touch on the novels. But the thing is, I haven't read a whole lot of the novels. The novels were never really a major thing for me. So, I mean, my topics have to do with some of the novels that I have read or things about the novels that I know about. Yeah, Anonymous Science. That's the episode I thought it was. Yeah. Dana asks, why does the 180-degree rule work? I think it works because it allows the camera to mimic a third-party observer of the scene. You as the camera, even though it's not a continuous shot, even though you're cutting from shot to shot instead of, panning back and forth, the 180-degree rule mimics what you would see from each perspective if you were a viewer standing there watching it. So this shot is you standing here looking over here. And then this shot is you standing here looking over here. So it's cleaner and simpler than if you look this way and then you look that way and you stepped across the line, And also, by following the 180-degree rule, you create even though you're looking at separate shots, you're creating a connection between the two subjects because they are looking across the frame at each other. So because you're on the same side, when you're shooting this guy over here, he's looking in this direction. See, he's looking across the frame this way. Okay. So when you cut to the reverse shot, the other person is looking the opposite direction from the opposite side of the frame. So the subjects in the separate shots are looking at each other. They're both looking across the frame in the other direction. So it creates a sense of visual continuity, so I think that's why it works. And yeah, and it's a rule because it works, because at least it works for most people, Steve Schmeling says, curious how you feel about the Shatner to Kay feud. Which side are you on, if any? I agree Bill did the cast dirty back then, but George seems to be petty about it still. I think we talked about this more recently and we talked about this a few weeks ago. Somebody asked a similar question. And I think originally I'm on George's side because I do think Shatner was probably a dick and an egomaniac on the set. I have no difficulty believing that at all. So I think initially George has a totally legitimate beef. But it's been 50 years, It's like at a certain point, even though you are completely in the right, at a certain point you do it feels like, yeah, but you've both moved on. You've both had pretty good careers. Maybe you could just let it go, or at least stop talking about it in public, like stop making it a thing, But I mean, if push comes to shove, I'm on George's side because Shatner's an asshole. But it does start to feel like, yeah, but I mean, it's been a long time, George. Maybe you could let it go, Oh, Lisa, the hat paradox. Yeah, when the me from the future gave present day me the Deep Space Nine hat in the Star Trek video. Yeah, that was I really like that bit. That was a good bit. Isaiah, you also like 80s, 90s rom-coms. I see you've mentioned several times in the chat. Another thing that we don't have in common, but good for you. I'm glad you like them. Fadeaway X says, do you watch any progressive TV shows like The Young Turks, David Pakman, or Majority Report with Sam Cedar? Not regularly. I've seen clips from them occasionally, but not usually. I don't know. Oh, and Lisa says best regards from Scotland. Well, thank you. You know, my ancestry way back. My people apparently originally come from Scotland, so it's I'm happy to accept the regards for my ancestral homeland. Janice CL says, whatever new Trek show they make, if it's in the 25th century or later, I would love to see the Romulan Republic featured or at least get a mention just to make them official canon. Again, you know, I feel like I feel like the Romulans have gotten more than enough attention in Star Trek productions over the last 20 years. Like, I'm not saying that it couldn't possibly be any good, that in the right hands, if someone had, you know, the right take on it, or a concept that involved them or included them, or even, as you say, just mentioned them here and there. Like, I'm not saying that that couldn't possibly be good, and there's no way I would like it, but you know, I feel like I've seen enough of the Romulans. 255 AD says, "Are we cool? You glossed over some of my cues." Yeah, we're cool. I'm not skipping your questions intentionally at all, my friend. I see one you said, Cisco piloting the Defiant. Somehow would that have been overkill? Yeah, it would have been super overkill. Yeah. No, we're good. I mean, if you need me to reassure you, I'm happy to do that. But if you post questions, or if anybody posts questions and I don't answer them, it's most likely because I just didn't see them, or I didn't have anything interesting to say in response to them. It's not because I'm mad at you at all. No, please don't assume that. Yeah, Fadeaway X. I'm sure when you meet him at a meet and greet or a con or something, I'm sure he's lovely. I'm not saying he's like a raging asshole to everybody he meets. You know, I'm sure he's fine. Like, I met Richard Dawkins once. I actually worked with him a little bit on a video shoot. He was a perfect gentleman. He was lovely. Like, he was great. I have no complaints about him person to person at all. Very professional, very patient. He was sick that day, but he still, you know, did what he had to do and was completely professional and was very unfailingly kind and polite to everyone who worked with him that day. Doesn't mean he's not a fucking asshole in all the ways that he's an asshole. Dana asks, who's your favorite Trek villain? Ooh. It might be Gul Dukat. It might also be General Chang from Star Trek 6. Part of me is always pulled toward General Chang. Oh God, General Chang from Star Trek 6 is so goddamn good. I love him so much. It's also hard not to say Khan, especially Khan as in Star Trek 2. I mean, he was good in the Space Seed as well in the original series, but Khan in Star Trek 2 is like so good. If I had to pick, I'd probably say Dukat, just because we get so much of him, and he's so good. But very close second is, I would say, is General Chang. Yeah, very close is General Chang. David C. Drake, how long have you been disconnected from the Great Link? So long, I can't even remember it. Gibbs, I have not seen episode 3 of Picard yet. I am not going to watch it until tomorrow, because I review the episodes with my buddy Jason, who is the creator and co-host of the podcasts that I'm on. And Jason and I are reviewing Picard together this season. And the way we have been doing it is we both watch the episode together for the first time, and then we record our review right after that. And because of Jason's work schedule, we can't do that. The earliest we can do that is Saturday. So I have not watched it yet. I will not watch it until tomorrow, when I watch it with Jason. and then we will record our review, and then I will put that review up very shortly after, and then you will know what I thought of episode 3. Oh, Fadeaway X with a super chat says, please accept my Google Wallet balance as a tribute. Well, thank you very much. I humbly accept it. I really appreciate it. Yeah, Radical Bacon, that fits with what I know too. Yeah. I noticed I did a genealogy search on my family about probably 15 years ago and found something similar. Yeah. I know that we have been there. My line of the Shiveses have been in the United States since at least 1790, which I believe was the first census. There was a Shives that is related to me in the 1790 census, and we have been in this general area since the mid 19th century. So yeah, that fits with what I know as well. Natsumi Hime says, any feelings on the BattleTech franchise? I'm completely unfamiliar with it. So I have no feelings on it. I have not watched any of it. Will Frank, this is interesting. The YouTube auto-generated captions just gave Gold Ducat is Gold Ducat. Okay. No, I understand 25580. Like I said, if you need reassurance every once in a while, I'm happy to offer it. But no, you and I are cool. Like if I miss a question of yours, it's nothing personal, believe me. Super chat from the Lady Eternal says, good time zone. Thanks for all your awesome content. If you could have Mark Shepard as a series regular in any Star Trek property, current or future, what kind of role would you want him to play? First, let me look up Mark Shepard to remind myself of who that is. Oh, that guy. Oh, from Doom Patrol. Yeah. He's terrific. Oh, yes, and yeah, and he's sterling on leverage. That's right. Yes, he's sterling on leverage. And he's Willoughby on Doom Patrol. Who would I have him as in a Star Trek show? Good question. I mean, I think he's good as the kind of good guy who seems like a bad guy kind of thing. He might be good as like a member of the Q continuum. If you wanted to have a Q in the show, but not have John Delancey play that Q, have him be a different Q, he might be good as that kind of thing. Once or twice. Again, I wouldn't want to overdo it. I'd want to have him come in for like one episode, and have him be a Q. Or maybe have him be like a secret Q. Like you don't know that he's a Q at first, and then he is revealed as one, midway through the episode, and you're like, oh yeah, of course, right? Something like that. Lisa Simpson says, and I answered this already, but I will be happy to answer it again. Am I enjoying The Last of Us? Yes, I think The Last of Us has been brilliant so far. Radical Bacon asks, so are all these Shiveses from Western Maryland your cousins or one brother somewhere in there? I have one brother. My dad was an only child. My grandfather on my dad's side had a brother and a sister. So some of them are cousins. Some of them I don't know at all. And I imagine we're all probably related if you go back far enough, but not all of the Shiveses in this area are people that are close family to me. No. But some of them are, yes. Okay, so I'm going to start wrapping up, but if anybody has final questions, please feel free to throw them in there. and I'll do my final sort of plugs and pitches here, and then I'll come back to the chat and answer a few final questions before we wrap up the show for the night. So first of all, as always, thanks everybody for watching. If you enjoy my work that I do here on YouTube and you want to support my work and help me continue making videos, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Steve Shives, or a channel member by clicking the join button down there. Either one gets you access to members only and patrons only posts, including the opportunity to submit questions ahead of time for these Ask Away streams. Those are the first questions that I answer in the opening part of the show. You can submit those ahead of time the Monday before a Friday Ask Away. I put up a thing that lets you submit questions ahead of time. So that's something that you can do. And you can also just throw a few bucks my way every month to help me continue to pay the bills and make YouTube videos. And all of you who do that, who are patrons or members, I appreciate you so much. I couldn't do this without you. Also, don't forget that in addition to the YouTube stuff, I'm on a couple of podcasts, the Lemmy Listen family of podcasts. I am a co-host along with the great Jason Harding on Late Seating, a movie review podcast, where we take classic films and give them a fresh review and see if they deserve whatever reputation they have, be it good or bad. Our new episode just went up today, I believe, and it is our review of The Big Lebowski, the classic Coen brothers film starring Jeff Bridges and John Goodman. And you can hear our review of that up right now. Links are in the description. Also, I am on the Star Trek themed comedy podcast, The Ensign's Log, alongside Jason and also our very own Dana Cole, who is in the live chat with us as usual. Jason, Dana, and I play original characters who are currently serving aboard the TNG era Star Trek Enterprise, Starship Enterprise. And our stories kind of are our own thing. The events of TNG are sort of happening in the background, and occasionally will intersect with our stories, but often don't. And our show is currently set in the TNG era, and it's been going really good. We're closing in on the end of our 5th season. I think Jason said we have about 5 episodes left before we finish our 5th season of the Ensign's Log, and things are really starting to get interesting and really starting to get good. So I hope you are enjoying it if you are listening. And if you are not listening, especially if you like my Star Trek related content, please consider giving a listen to the Ensign's Log. I hope you will enjoy it as much as we enjoy making it, which is a lot. So maybe that's too much to ask, but I hope you enjoy it. Links in the description if you want to check out the Ensign's Log. Also, as always, don't forget the charity links, charitylinks.page. Earlier, Some Random Geek was sharing some of the links for individuals that you can help out with us in the live chat. Geek also is kind enough to put together a Google Doc with links of, PayPal accounts and GoFundMe pages and stuff for some friends of ours who need a helping hand. So if you feel like helping out someone who is in a bit of trouble financially and could use the support, please consider using the charity links for that. We really, really appreciate it. Now, let me turn one last time to the live chat to see a few final questions. Seth Jones asks, I need something to watch. Do I start Strange New Worlds or Deep Space Nine? I would say start Strange New Worlds because there's only 10 episodes there. And you can get through that pretty quickly. And then if you enjoy it, I would say go Deep Space Nine after that. Yeah. Anonymous Science says, have you read Alan Moore's Green Lantern stories? I have not. Kara, it was lovely to have you. And you don't have to, it's fine if you don't know what questions to ask. It's cool to just hang out and participate in the chat. That's fine. And also, I think you asked earlier, what's the next Poirot? Or no, when's the next Poirot? Well, this coming Wednesday is a Star Trek episode that we're watching on Trek Reluctantly. Then the week after that, so a week from this coming Wednesday, is the next Poirot. Yeah, David C. Drake. Donnie, you're out of your element. Super chat from All Mod Cons. Late season stuffy videos. Who is Homer J. Crustacean supposed to be? Oh, that is Jordan Peterson. That is Jordan Peterson. I mean, it's not literally Jordan Peterson. Literally, it's Homer J. Crustacean. Like it's a different person. In the Steve and Stuffy universe, Homer J. Crustacean and Jordan Peterson both exist. But Homer J. Crustacean is obviously a parody, a satire, a jab, if you will, in the direction of Jordan Peterson. And I believe that's it. So, all right. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you for joining me. And don't forget, we mentioned this on Trek Reluctantly on Wednesday, and we will mention it again this coming Wednesday. But a week from tonight, on March the 10th, Dana and I will be doing a special bonus live stream together. It will also be a watch along, and we will be watching Galaxy Quest together. So it'll work the same way as Trek Reluctantly, where we're not going to show the movie on the stream. You're going to have to find the movie for yourself, and just I'll give you a countdown, and we'll all watch it together, locally. But it'll be Dana and I watching it on the stream together, and with all of you in the chat, and we're going to watch Galaxy Quest together. So hopefully that'll be fun. That'll be a week from tonight. And again, we'll remind you about it on Wednesday for Trek Reluctantly. But if you are interested in that, find yourself a copy of Galaxy Quest. It is on Netflix, or if you have it on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever, we'll get it all synced up so we all press play at the same time, and we'll watch it together. That should be a ton of fun. So that's a week from tonight, Dana and I watching Galaxy Quest together with all of you, hopefully. So anyway, see you for that in a week. See you on Wednesday for Trek Reluctantly, where we're watching Deep Space Nine. We're watching Rejoined is the next episode of Deep Space Nine we're watching together. And have a good night. Have a good weekend. And I'll see you next time, everybody. Thanks again, and take care.